Thank you. Hi, my name is Horowitz, and I'm going to talk to you about one of my big philosophies in life. So we started out as a making culture, right? If you needed a spear, you went out, you got two rocks, you chipped them together, you made an arrowhead, and you lashed it to a stick. And if you needed a loincloth, you went out, you took that spear, and you killed a bison. You skinned it, and you tanned it. And as our needs became more advanced, and our manufacturing techniques became more advanced, people began to develop skills, and craftsmen emerged. And when the Industrial Revolution hit, we moved to mass production of goods within factories, and slowly but surely, those craftsmen faded into the background. And our culture, as a result, shifted from makers to consumers. But right now, we stand at the cusp of a really interesting time in history. What techniques that were otherwise impossible and things that we could never make before, everybody in this room can do in their very own homes. We can print plastic components from our desktop computers, and we can make just about any type of hardware device we want with open source technologies. There's just one thing that troubles me about all of this. It's a phrase I've heard over a dozen times this past year. Someone will come to me with a brilliant idea, followed by the question, where do I find somebody to build this? And every time I'll answer with the same response, why don't you build it? And I'm always met by apprehension, but this is my philosophy. Just start building. And here's why. When you have a purpose, you can learn whatever skills you need to achieve that goal. If you have something tangible to apply your learning to, you can visualize the progress you're making and learn out of love. And the reason I say this with so much confidence is that a year and a half ago, I was asking myself that very same question. Where do I find somebody to build this? As part of Design for America at Northwestern University, I heard about a project called Jerry the Bear. It was a concept on a Post-it note. And basically, it was a robotic teddy bear to educate children with type 1 diabetes how to take care of themselves. Now, I was immediately attracted to this idea because when I was a child, I was diagnosed with human growth hormone deficiency, another type of endocrine disorder which basically equates to injections throughout your childhood. Now, for diabetics, this is increased tenfold. You're injected up to 8 times a day. Your fingers are pricked. The school nurse is pulling you out of class. Your parents are waking you up in the middle of the night. And so I hopped on board with 2 feet to get this Post-it note into the hands of those kids. There was just one little problem. None of us knew anything about circuitry, resistors, transistors, phototransistors, diodes, robotics, mechatronics. I didn't even know what the word mechatronics meant, let alone how to program pieces of silicone and ceramic and bring them to life. What I did know is that I believed in this idea, that I loved this idea, that I knew it had to be made. So over the next 10 weeks, we had a crash course with an emphasis on the word crash. I can't tell you how many times my programs would not work because I was missing a semicolon, how many circuits I made that outright didn't function because I had soldered a wire to the wrong pin, and how many of those ended up catching fire and smoking in my face. At the end of those 10 weeks, though, we had this. Here's a picture of our first prototype. Certainly a little rough around the edges. It has the eyes of a Furby, and what you can't tell from this picture is that its body is sculpted from rock-hard modeling foam, and the only thing that's holding its head to its body are 2-inch metal nails. Just details. We had created something that we had known nothing about before, and let me tell you, that is one of the most empowering feelings that exists. I began to realize how the same piece of information taught within a classroom can take on a whole new meaning when applied to something real. A line of code as cryptic as TCCR greater than 1 can be demystified from a way to control the digital port registers of a microcontroller to the way to make a circuit laugh. Now, I had discovered a new type of education, one driven by purposed projects, and I was hooked. I didn't want to stand for taking any more classes in college that didn't give me the same sense of fulfillment. So I did at the end of that year just about what one individual does, exactly one, in the School of Engineering, McCormick School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. I changed my major and I made up my own with quite possibly the longest title you've never heard. It's called Mechatronics and User Interaction Design. And it's basically how people play with robots. And so I kind of like to say I majored in this Jerry the Bear in college, and at the end of the day, it's kind of true. And so when the time came to begin working on Jerry the Bear, this is the prototype we have now, a lot cuter, but working on this full-time as a business, it took me about 30 seconds to convince my teammate Hannah Chung, who's sitting right there in the audience, to move to Providence with me, and now every day is a Jerry day. And interestingly enough, the hardest part of this whole process, getting from there to here, it wasn't the circuitry, it wasn't the robotics, certainly wasn't convincing my teammate to move to Providence, and it wasn't the countless hours of failure. Don't get me wrong, those were difficult. But the hardest part of this whole process was taking that first step, believing enough in myself that I had the power to learn these skills. Now, taking that leap is what breaks down a skyscraper of information into a staircase. Now, there's no elevator to the top, but once you take that first step, the second becomes easier, and the third becomes faster. And invariably, you will stumble and trip on your way to the top. But who wouldn't when you're climbing the staircase to the top of a skyscraper? So the next time someone comes to you and asks you, or the next time you ask yourself, where do I find somebody to build this? Remember these 3 words. Just start building. Thank you.